So, Russ, we have some news this week.
Yes, we do.
Here we are, we are the first episode of our, I guess, our second year. Because I'm guessing last week's ended the first, I don't know. We had the second episode of our second year, and we have a new logo, as listeners may have noticed already.
Yeah, check it out.
Yeah, this was designed by Fast Signs in Staten Island, New York. If anybody likes it and wants to get something done, that's my brother's place, Richard Vizzuto. So ask for him. And if you want to get a design done, you should the guy who designed our new logo, which I think is very cool, with the pink adult music logo over the brick wall. That was a designer named Efren Aquino. And ask for him if and you'll get a great design. That's Fast Signs in Staten Island, New York. And also, we're getting business cards, me and you, on their way. And I feel like Steve Martin in The Jerk. I feel like I'm somebody now.
Yeah, thanks, guys. That's
thanks. Yeah,
a big improvement. The neon really pops. And
I think it looks cool.
Looks great.
We'll probably get comments about it. Actually, we already had one nice comment. I showed it to a friend, and he said it kind of underlines the fun aspect of the podcast. I thought that was really a nice thing to say. It was kind of what we were going for.
I hope so.
You know.
Anyway, it looks great. Yeah. Thanks a lot for that. And,
thanks for that, everybody at Fast Signs in Staten Island, and especially you, Efren. Thank you very much, and especially my brother Richard, of course. Too.
Yeah, Richard, thanks, and thanks for listening to us. All the time.
I think he's got a he wrote to me the other day. He told me he's got I think for Christmas he got a Bluetooth speaker. Now I have to tell you, my family they like music enough, but they're not the most kind of music loving people. Like I guess hogged the entire music gene, because I'm just fanatical about it, and everybody else just kind of yeah, it makes me happy. That's it. I do other things too, but I'm definitely not like that. So he's been listening to the music, not only us, but the music we've been recommending, which is pretty surprising for me because I don't know. I'm kind of impressed. I hope he likes what we're recommending, and help you like it too, listeners.
That's right.
Yeah, because I got to tell you, this week in the classical field, I have. Often I'll have 3 out of 3 that I'll really like. This week I have, really 1 out of 3, but I didn't hate the other 2. I just had a few. They didn't really rock my world.
Hey, you picked them.
I did. Yeah, but I didn't listen to them first. But even so, I kind of like that because I want to hear it. I don't really have time. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to listen to this. And I want to hear this. And in one case, I figured, this is going to be just great. And it really was just okay. But we'll get to that.
All right. Well, so here we are, episode 51, and we are adult music.
We're almost at my age.
That's right.
Coming up on your age soon.
Yeah. Don't remind me. Oh. Yeah. Feeling the bones.
No worries.
So, as you can see by that popping new neon logo, we are Adult Music, the podcast with music for the mature mind. Before we get into the music, every week we generally feature 3 new classical or recent classical releases, 3 jazz. Sometimes there's a crossover of other influences, which there will be tonight. Tell you that up front.
Oh, next week too. Wait till you see what I got next week.
Oh, all right.
Okay.
So before we get into the classical section, I want to remind our listeners that in the episode description, you find links to Spotify and Apple Music for all the music we'll discuss. And at the top of the description, there's a link to the full episode playlist where you can get all the music in one place on our preferred streaming platform, Deezer. You can also follow us there on the podcast and see the playlists all in one spot. That's Adult Music Podcast as a username there. Now, if you don't see the description of list or links on or the hyperlinks aren't active on whatever app or platform you listen to us on, come over to our host site, Podbean, and everything is easy to follow there. Now, if you enjoy the podcast, please do follow or subscribe on whatever app or platform you're listening to us on. If you take a moment to give us a ranking or write a review, that helps us get in the listings in the musical categories on the browsing on each service, and that helps us increase our audience, which we'd appreciate. Above and beyond that, if you have any comments, questions, and want to get in touch with us directly, our email address is adultmusicpodcast, all one word, @gmail.com.
I personally think that people are going to be wowed by our new logo, and they're going to put us in all those like sites because we look good.
Yeah, we'll see what happens next week.
Yeah, we'll find out.
Flashy new icon.
Yeah, that's all I'm thinking about now. Anyway, so I don't know. Well, are we ready to go here or what? Let's go to the first classical recording.
Oh, I should say, too, just one thing before we get into that. If you do want to listen to the music before you listen to the podcast, I'm pretty good about getting the playlist up on Monday. So just within 24 hours of the podcast itself going up, the musical selections for the next episode, everything that's available on streaming is up. So if you want to listen to it early as we're listening to it, please find it on Deezer.
Yeah. Okay, so let's just go right into it. I always try to kind of get some sort of an early music beginning for this because I kind of, in my younger years, I used to listen to like Baroque music in the morning, and it just kind of set a good mood for the rest of the day.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I kind of like to, it's been a lifelong thing now, really, since my first job after college, and when I was in my 20s, working on classical music radio at WBUR in Boston, which is now all news apparently.
Oh, what a bummer!
NPR. They're one of the two NPR stations there. Uh-huh. That was my first job. I was behind the boards, not in front of them. They wouldn't let me talk in the microphone, and I'm sure you can figure out why. But
not in Boston. No
although, given some of the people that are on NPR, I mean,
that's true now. Yeah,
pretty much. They should just let anyone on. Hey, you talk. All right. Anyway, first recording this week is, in fact, it's not a Baroque. Well, it's hard to say what it is. It's really more from the classical
era, right? Yeah.
Maybe the Galant era, which kind of came between the Baroque and classical. Like classical had more lines and like more complicated, like sort of vertical harmony as opposed to all horizontal the way Bach had it. And the Galant style kind of went for something a little more superficial. It was just pretty on the surface, and it really wasn't deep at all. And this guy, Franz Josef Aumann, who is our first composer tonight, might be in that category. Let's do an investigation here. This album is called Chamber Music in the Abbey of St. Florian, or it would be Sankt Florian since it's in Austria. And the ensemble playing this music is, appropriately enough, the Ars Antiqua Austria, conducted by Gunnar Letzbor, who also plays violin. And this is on the Challenge Classics label from the Netherlands. All right, let me give you some background. Franz Josef Aumann. Now, one of the reasons I picked this was it's another composer I had from the past that I really knew nothing about. And his story sounded interesting. He worked at an abbey, as we said, and that always interests me too. I have this thing for the monastic life. I mean, I've never, I've done like Buddhist meditation in temples here in Japan, but I've never actually been in a Christian abbey to live that life. I'd be curious to do that, though.
Taking vows of silence and making fruit cakes with high alcohol content and stuff like that.
Well, there's that. I think or drinking beer during Lent. I think that'd be my favorite part.
Yeah,
those are the European ones, anyway.
That would work.
But in the Catholic religion I grew up in, and still acknowledge. Okay, so I'm still classical music really kept me in that.
Right
when I was kind of doing other things. But anyway, so Aumann, he was an Austrian composer. So were Mozart and Haydn, by the way. So these were really, the big names of this era. And he was born in Treismauer in Austria in 1728. So remember, Mozart was born in 1756. Haydn was born around 1732. So he's really around Haydn's generation. But Haydn lived for a long time, and Mozart did not. Okay. And he studied in Vienna, where everybody studied. And for some reason we still don't know, he relocated to the Sankt Florian Abbey in 1753 at the age of 25. Now, and he stayed there for the rest of his life. He became Regen's Chori, which I guess is the choral director, and a year after that, he was ordained into the priesthood.
Oh, maybe those Austrian women scared him into the Abbey or something.
Maybe, although Haydn's story, it's not similar to this, but Haydn also, he was hired by the Esterhazy family and stayed with them for most of his life, and then the last 10 years he started traveling around Europe. His music had become very famous by that time. So it's kind of I guess it was sort of a thing then. And also the religious life was also something as well that people considered. So he remained in the monastery service until he died in 1797. So that means that he was in the monastery service for Mozart's entire life. Mozart died in 1791. All right. Now, Beethoven, by the way, was born in 1770. So Beethoven's very early works may have been heard by Aumann, too, if he actually had access to all this music in the monastery. I don't know what he did, whether he was cloistered or not. Okay, some of his works. He wrote a Requiem Mass for the deaths of each prelate he served, so there are 12 of them. Okay, that's a lot of Requiem Masses.
Yeah.
He wrote mass settings, motets, litanies, offertories, oratorios, as you would imagine, living in an abbey. And he wrote also Singspiele, which are kind of operas that are kind of with spoken sort of. They're almost like it's almost like musical theater, basically. It's like you're kind of talking, and then there's an aria, a song that you would sing. So it's kind of like that era's version of a Broadway musical, I guess.
Right. He's got a little sense of humor in some of the things he does too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he wrote those Singspiele in the vernacular, it says here, which is kind of interesting because most of his stuff would be, I guess, in Latin. If you're doing mass settings. Okay, so his chamber music, which is what this is an album of, is scattered throughout Europe, and the archives of the St. Florian Monastery have only a handful of chamber works, and I'm guessing this is them, okay, on this album. The booklet notes in the CD don't really give too much information on each one, which I'll kind of comment on as we go. In his music, one of the interesting things about his music is that violas have equal status with the violins. So it's not like total equality because they're not cellos, they're violones. They kind of sound sort of like the Baroque era sort of viola da gamba type instrument. They're kind of, the tone isn't really focused. It kind of tends to spread, and therefore you tend to play it very slowly, which is the case on this album. This music though could have easily been played on more modern instruments or more classical instruments, let's say like a traditional string quartet. I really don't know what the historical sort of status of that would be regarding his music, but this was taken up by an ensemble that specializes in these older instruments, so that's what we've got. Okay, so it's not quite total equality among all instruments in dialogue as Haydn would have it, because Haydn string quartets are famous for each of the voices, the two violins, the viola and cello, each having an individual voice and adding to a sort of musical conversation. And in those days, too, professionals wouldn't play these. You would play these at home with your friends and family. This is what people did before mass media. Okay, even before radio, you just kind of played an instrument. Yep. And with your pals or your family or whatever.
It was more participatory.
I do miss that, actually.
Yes.
Yeah. Now though, the problem now, though, is that we tend to think of, wow, they must have been really good musicians. Well, in some cases, probably.
Yeah.
But,
yes and no. Probably just like any other time. But yeah.
But the thing is, those Haydn quartets and they were playable mostly by people at home. Now we get really difficult to play works that are specifically written for professionals who have all this training. Some of these works, especially, and that started with Beethoven.
Right. He
ruined everything. Well, he ushered something new in. Let's just say that. Okay. All right. It says here we can detect in Aumann's music a preference for melodic lines reminiscent of the folk music that was practiced in the region above the river Enns. which I guess would make sense to any Austrian listeners we might have, or people in that general area of the world. During this time, the significance and specific quality of folk music was first knowingly perceived and appreciated. Indeed, you can hear a lot of it in Mozart's finales. He uses a lot of these folk-like themes, not folk themes. We didn't get to actually transcribing folk music for classical music until really Bartók and Vaughan Williams in the early 20th century. But it was folk music was interesting to these people, and they sort of incorporated its elements, if not like in any scholarly way, because it was music of the people and it was immediately appealing, and that is the case here too. Okay, Aumann, like Haydn, was relatively free to experiment as he wanted, and this is a composer whose music is really waiting to be rediscovered. It's pretty good, although it's probably a lot better than this recording puts across. Now, I don't want to damn the performances or the recording with faint praise, because I think it's all good, but I think we could hear something a little slicker than this that delves into the music more deeply. This is another one of those examples of a composer whose music doesn't have a performing tradition, so we're hearing it for the first time, and I found this recording to be very careful. Let's see. The first piece is called Parthia in G major for 5 instruments, 2 violins, 2 violas, and a violone, which I guess would be sort of like a gamba-type instrument. All right, so despite the classical era of these recordings, these works are played with no vibrato on older instruments, and we're probably hearing gut strings as well. It sounds like a Baroque recording on period instruments, really, but the music doesn't sound Baroque, although it does have some Baroque forms. That usually you'll hear, like especially like in this piece, you'll hear one section like in a Bach suite, and then there'll be like a contrasting section that brings it back to its original key. Like it'll go up to the dominant key, and then from the dominant it'll go back to the tonic key. That's really how Bach's suites work. And I wasn't really following the keys here, but it sounded kind of like something like that to me. So the speed on this first movement, which doesn't have a marking, is pretty slow. But the rhythms are well marked, and the themes are clearly outlined. This music sounds like it has a lot of joy in it, but this ensemble doesn't bring that out. They're going for something more elegant and refined. Maybe the Abbey setting has something to do with that. And in fact, the dance rhythm in this is very marked. Okay, it sounds like something very elegant, like aristocrats would be involved in. It's very appealing, and the composition itself is engaging to the ear. The second movement is a Minuet Slow, again. Slow is going to be a word I'm going to use a lot on this. All of these works are played at a pretty slow tempo, including the Allegro, which kind of means like this like a happiness or a joy to it, and I kind of feel like they're a little too slow to put that across. Okay, the Minuet, again, slow, probably the proper dance speed for a minuet, in fact, because we usually hear them a lot faster than this. I like the way the rhythm is marked to indicate where the beat falls, and it's like the ensemble is playing this for a crowd of dancers. Again, the speed and approach gives the music an elegant lilt rather than a smile. And I think the smile is there. It's just not being brought out by this ensemble. This is just me guessing. I mean, I'm kind of thinking of my whole music listening history and what these, classical, this era's, the way the music is formed kind of makes me think of other music, of course. And I'm thinking, a lot of things aren't really being brought out of this. Okay, we get to the third movement, Andante. This one's more song-like. And again, I'm enjoying the pulsing of the downbeat when it comes, as though it's a dance. This one is more of a classical or galant type of melody. It's homophonic, which means there's a melody, and the rest of the instruments are all kind of playing less important melodies that are the harmony is supporting that main melody. So it's not polyphonic like a Baroque work would be. And the fourth movement finale is only clocks in at less than 2 minutes. Also, it's dance-like, and it's pretty fast, but not very fast, and it's appealing. All right, so we have our first work there. It's a little slow, but it's nice. It's pretty. I liked it. The next, though, we come to a cassation in D major, 2 violins, a flautello concertato, which is played by Michael Aumann, an alto viola, and a cello. Oh boy, this really hurt my ears. Let me go into this. This is a slowly played dance melody, but it features, as I mentioned, a flautello, which is a wooden flute that sounds kind of like a piccolo.
Yeah.
It's really piercing.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like this soloist or this engineer took that into account. This just kind of cuts through the whole texture, and oh man, it really assaults your ears. It's very loud, especially in its higher register where it spends a lot of time. Mm-hmm. The pitch sounds a little tough to maintain on the flautello because he wavers on a lot of held notes. These are older instruments, and it may have something to do with that. I remember hearing a lot of Baroque-era brass in the early days, although they've managed to master these really difficult-to-play instruments these days. It's incredible. But I remember they were always a little out of tune in the early days of the period instruments playing, and they wouldn't get the full tone. That's sort of happening here. There's a wavering tone, and I don't think it's vibrato either. I think it's just more like he's having trouble maintaining the steady tone. This particular movement sounds a bit careful in its pacing, more than the first movement. I really felt like they were accommodating the flautello here by playing kind of more slowly and deliberately. The second movement, Minuet, a flautello again, piercing, wavering in pitch on high notes. This is really getting to me at this point. It gives a roughness to the texture that I've always liked, but here, I'm not so sure. This Minuet doesn't have quite the dancey quality we heard in the previous piece, despite its being slow. The third movement, Andante, is played con sordino, which means that all of the string instruments have mutes on them. And this flautello at this point, man, it seems like it's capable of only one shade of sound, loud and piercing and bright. It's the first thing you hear, and it takes your head off. Meanwhile, all of the strings play this appealingly, get this appealing balance with all the mutes on them, and they sound really good. I like the pizzicato quality of the bass. Mm-hmm. It's just that flautello that kills it for me. But no worries, we will later hear the ensemble play with mutes with only strings. All right, fourth movement is a Minuet again. We hear another one. This starts with full strings, and the flautello comes in the middle of the phrase, in its lower register, so it's a little nicer. It sounds a bit further back in this movement, like they finally figured out, hey, we're pinning the needles with this flautello. We need to place it back a little bit. It's a little easier on the ear, but only a little. To be honest, this guy, the soloist here, the flautello player, sounds like he's struggling with the instrument. It might be the case. I don't really know much about the instrument or how hard it is to play. And the finale is a more lively movement than the other four, and again, the flautello stands out like a sore thumb. I'm glad this was over at this point. It was rough. Give it a listen. You'll hear what I mean, okay? Oh, maybe you'll like it. I don't know. Next, we have another cassatio cassation in C major. 2 violins, 2 violas, and a bass. And this starts with a divertimento, and we're back to elegance with the well-balanced strings playing this lilting divertimento. I hope you like lilting music, because that's what you're going to hear. All of this music has a lilt to it. It's not played with like energy and joy. It's more of like I think it's trying to capture something old world. Okay, when they play this. Okay, the second movement, Minuet. For me at this point, and we're now on track 11, and I've already heard. This is the third piece we're hearing, and by this point, I was thinking there's too little variety in this ensemble's approach to these movements. They tend to take them all at the same sort of tempo. They don't really color the sounds at all. They use the same sort of lilt. It just got to be a little too much. So each of these works would be great on its own, but listening to it straight through, I was starting to get, I just kind of wanted a little bit of a change. I think the change was supposed to be the flautello in the previous movement, but that wasn't really one I enjoyed much. All right, this particular Minuet has a chugging rhythm in the second theme that I feel is taken too slow, and I feel there's ample variety. Well, again, though, they're using these old period instruments, so they probably couldn't play it too much faster. I feel like there's ample variety in these pieces, but the approach the ensemble is taking to them kind of disguises that. The performance lacks subtlety. The fortes are practically slashed with the bows, so I didn't really like this particular approach here. Now, the third movement, Andante, is played with mutes on all these string instruments, and I liked this a lot. I like the sound of the mutes on the strings here, the gentle sound it gives the ensemble, also the way the pizzicati are sound in the bass register. Pizzicati is plucking the strings, for those who don't know. It's also a cool Italian last name, Pizzicato.
I did like that bass line. It sounds pretty attractive.
This was a pretty movement. It was well executed, too. Okay, the finale is played presto, and when they get a presto marking, they actually do play it at a pretty quick tempo, and it sounds good. This one has some relatively cheerful, chipper playing, energetic, on the safe side, but registering well. Balance is good. Okay, this next curiosity is a song called Die Hex. Die Hex means the witch. It's about a witch.
And it's mom.
And it's it's the singer's or the narrator of the song's mom. Basically, the song goes that the singer, who's apparently a little child, sees his mom fly off, not on a broom, but it's a, what does he say? It's a
fork or something.
It's kind of a roasting fork. So it's probably this big kind of thing that you'd stick a piece of beef with into the skies, and he's imagining what she's doing there, but she's back to being mom by dinner time when she comes back from whatever evil rounds he imagines that she was up to, and she puts dinner on the table, and they're all happy. All right. It's pretty amusing, really.
It's pretty funny. But
I'm kind of wondering about this performance. Okay. What is this piece, first of all, doing in the Abbey's archives? Why are they singing about witches in an Abbey? Anyway, I wish the booklet had given me a little bit to go on with this piece. It doesn't mention this at all, so it's just a big mystery. Okay. The vocalist here is, he's a viola player too, and he just kind of took the tenor role. And it's sort of like, if anybody likes soccer, or football as you call it in Europe, it's sort of like when one of the backfield players takes over in goal, where they're not really a goalie, but they do. They go with what they know. So this guy's a viola player, and he's singing the tenor, and he's not really such a great vocalist. I think he's trying to imitate a child's voice, and they figured his voice was good enough to be able to do that. He kind of sounds like, I'm thinking of a recording I heard long ago of the Barber of Seville by Rossini, conducted by Neville Mariner with Agnes Balza and Thomas Allen. There's a scene at the beginning of Act 2 where Count Almaviva comes in disguised as Rosina's music teacher, and he puts on this nasally tone to show how kind of pedantic and boring he is, like he's singing Gioia pace pace. It's really annoying.
Oh, you sounded like you were from Queens there for a minute.
That's me. Oh, yeah. Well, I always revert to my Queens voice, or more like Brooklyn when I do that. Oh, by the way, I should mention, I just saw Saturday Night Fever again for the first time in 30 years this week.
Wow.
Oh, boy, did that put me back in that time. Jeez.
Wow. That was the high point of American fashion right there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I couldn't wait for that to end. Boy, those big collars. I was only a kid then.
Yeah. Your mom used to dress you in those kind of big collars and plaid pants.
The fat tie. It was like a clown suit. Jeez.
Horrible.
Yeah. And platform shoes, too. I didn't have any of those, though, thankfully. Yeah. Okay. So this song is sort of sung like that. It kind of has that kind of nasally tone to it. I think he's going for a comic effect here.
Yeah, it's supposed to be funny.
Yeah. And there's also occasional whining strings as well. He's going for a childlike sound, but to me, he kind of winds up sounding drunk. The text. Okay, so we already went through the text. Again, I thought this could have been given a livelier and more amusing and appealing performance. It was okay. I mean, it was interesting to listen to, I guess, but again, you kind of want these songs to kind of make you smile, and this kind of made me wonder what was going on. All right, so we have two more works left. There's a divertimento next. 2 violins, 2 violas, and a violone. See, they keep changing. There's a violone, there's a bass, there's a... I guess the violone is close to the cello, or maybe to a viola da gamba. The first movement has a nice appealing themes, and tempos are on the safe side. I don't really need to say that anymore. It's all like this. But this is an appealing enough performance. I liked it. The minuet, we get that lilt again. Sounds good. Third movement, Andante, has a really lovely opening theme. Again, not shown in its best light by the performance. A little more subtlety in the phrasing would have really made this stand out well. This is a work worth looking into if anybody's looking for something new to perform. Divertimento in B major. Finale is Presto, and these all come across well in this album, all of the finales. There's an upbeat tempo, the phrasing is good, doesn't have much subtlety, but it's a very appealing. All right, now the last work is sort of the biggest. This is a Parthia again, so this bookends. This is like the other bookend. The first work was a Parthia as well. In C major, this one has two violins, an alto viola, two clarini, which are sort of trumpets, early trumpets, and a bass with a tympanum. Plural would be timpani, so that's the big kettle drum. First movement, Presto, and we get a little textural variety in this piece with the presence of the booming tympanum. That really just explodes out of the speakers. It's pretty loud, and when the strings play forte, they make a loud slashing sound, which I really did enjoy. But I did like the sound of the tympanum. It was very big and well recorded, I thought. So the let's see. The slashing sound that the strings are making here at the beginning doesn't happen often because they have a lot of quiet figuration to play in this piece, and that's more pleasant to listen to. The clarini play fanfare-like lines, and they tend to underline approaches to cadences. So they tend to come in when the music is coming into the cadence. I think they're sort of used as punctuation in a way. The minuet has that lilting, slowish tempo. This time, the tympanum and the clarino, or clarini, two of them, punctuation. The third movement, Andante, is always played quietly. This has a nice, slow, classical-sounding melody, and it's approaching a Haydn or Mozart type of melody, so I was kind of starting to hear it coming into that. The performance, as throughout, again, lacks subtlety. A little bit more flexibility in the phrasing would have been welcome here. The finale, Tempo di Menuetto, it's a finale, but it comes across, well, it is a minuet. It's bold with the clarini and the tympanum, and it marches through its under 2-minute duration. It appealingly speeds up right at the end, and the whole album would sound better if it was closer to the ending tempo. It was kind of odd. So I thought this album, it was hit or miss, really. I thought it was just okay. The music was good. I think it's probably better than it sounded on this album. There might be like more that can be pulled out of it if anyone else wants to investigate. The performance doesn't show the music, I think, in the best light, although it's welcome because it does kind of give it to us in the first place. We need some. When there's a composer you're not familiar with, you really want to show them in like the best possible light if you can. To me, though, this album, if I were playing it, I mean, it's going to fade into the background, and so if you're going to play it for yourself, I mean, you can even put it on in the background while you're doing other things, and it'll stay there for the most part, except when the flatello comes in the second work and the tympanum in the last work. I'm really happy to hear music of an unknown composer, and especially one as engaging as this. I like the music. The approach used here is fine, but I still wanted more variety in tone and especially tempo in order to sustain the whole album. Like I said, if you listen to each of these works individually, like 4 movements this one, 4 movements that one, it'd probably sustain more interest. But altogether, it starts to sound really gray to me. I'd like to hear other approaches to this music, but this is welcome just because it's new. That's what I would say. I'd say have a listen. I wouldn't recommend like putting down cash for this one though.
Yeah, I kind of have similar sentiments. I thought it's quite pleasant sounding.
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
the music. Maybe it's about the particular time period that it's composed. It has Baroque sentiments, but it's more in classical era, but it's not as ornate as classical music becomes, with Mozart and things later. So I find the arrangements kind of sparse, and that actually is one of the appealing things I liked about it, because you can follow the lines in the music kind of easily. And I did like the tonal balance with viola, violin, sort of given equal kind of,
yeah,
tonal
I should have
weight.
mentioned that the balances, especially in the strings, were really excellent.
Yeah, so I liked that. I found the overall sort of approach kind of reserved, which started to get a bit unexciting after, after it was going on.
You don't want to say boring.
It was pleasant, but I was waiting to be moved more by that. As you say, that flute really put an edge on things there too.
On that particular work.
Yeah, that particular work. But I did like the timpani and trumpet type tones on the last work. So yeah, I liked it. As you say, could use a little bit more variety.
Okay, I will say, nice work for giving us this composer. Though.
Yeah,
that was really interesting to me.
I like it as to get inside a little bit more deeply in an era and break it up and relate a certain composer to. We sort of think of, any era, and those are the composers that are in it. But we don't think of, on a little bit deeper scale, and like who was living or could have heard the other composer and how old they would be. And so you sort of get into a little finer time scale. I think that's kind of interesting to do. And
one of the most interesting parts of classical music is you get the giants, right? But then you start filling in sort of like the other periods and like who was alive at the time they were. It just kind of gives you more of a picture of what was going on musically then. Yeah,
and I did like the muted things, and like I said, the bass pizzicato is really appealing as a contrast in that. So I could see why this composer would be really popular with string players, and people would want to, try to play this music.
I hope they will. I'd like to hear more of this. I want to hear another approach, let me say. Not that there's anything wrong with this approach, but I just kind of feel like you'd benefit from some other ones.
Yeah.
Okay. Off we go. Okay, next. Now, last week we talked about we had a string orchestral disc called Renewal. And one of the works on that disc, in fact, the one that kind of stood out was really the Mendelssohn string quartet arranged for string orchestra. And it stands out because A, it's 4 movements, and B, it was written by a composer that lived 100 plus years before the ones that were on the album. So it was sort of an odd thing to have on there. Now, the reason they put that particular string quartet by Mendelssohn on there, the F minor opus 80, was because, like all the other works on the album, it dealt with death and renewal, sort of the processing grief, things like that, and that was sort of the theme of that album. So here I had hearing that work, I had remembered that in around October 2021, the Takács Quartet, one of the world's great string quartets, put out an album of music by Felix and Fanny Mendelssohn, brother and sister. Fanny was the older of the two, the elder, I guess you would say, by about 4 years. And she was 3 years older than Felix. And this particular work, the program really intrigued me too, because there's a Fanny Mendelssohn's only string quartet is on here. And Fanny Mendelssohn died of complications from a stroke at a very young age. I think she was at 42 or something like that. I didn't write it down this week, but I mentioned it last week. And this left Felix really bereft. So he wrote a string quartet. He didn't compose for a while, and then he wrote the string quartet to sort out his feelings, the Quartet in F minor, opus 80. And then there's another work, Mendelssohn's string quartet in A minor, opus 13 from 1827. One of the things that relates all of these works is that they all reference Beethoven, who cast a huge shadow over the Romantic generation, especially in the 1830s. when these works were written. I want to mention, by the way, if you're sort of new to classical music, the 1960s were the era of the electric guitar. So you can think of the 1960s as being this watershed sort of moment in like popular music and rock music. Before that, you would go back, I guess, to the 1920s, to the swing era, the big band era. And so swing music was that was the sort of heyday of that. Well, the 1830s were the big decade of the piano. This is when all that was established. And it really was a decade. Everybody lived in, all these people lived in Paris at the time. Felix would eventually go to, they would all go to Germany eventually. But in the 1830s, Chopin, Mendelssohn, Liszt were all in Paris, as well as a lot of other great pianists and musicians in general. And they started what really was the Romantic era, and they all worshipped Beethoven, basically. They saw him as the first Romantic composer. And well, as I go through these works, I'll mention how that happens in here. Okay, well, let's talk about... I was thinking to myself, okay, this is going to be a great record, the Takács Quartet. These are kind of works that I haven't heard too often, so I'm really going to get to hear them in their original guise. Now, listening to this, I didn't really get that beautiful melded sound that you often get from the Takács Quartet. They just always were so reliable and sounded fantastic. So I had to look this up, and it turns out, okay, the only original member left of the original quartet of 1975 is Andras Feyer, the cellist. I'm pretty sure he's pretty old now. The ensemble had a beautifully melded sound and flowing way of playing, but that has changed. There are two new members that have changed the sound of the ensemble considerably. The second violinist, Harumi Rhodes, joined in 2018, and the violist Richard O'Neill joined in 2020. So there are two new members in this. And the other member is Edward Dusenberg, who's been their first violinist since 1993. So he's really an established member of the quartet. Now, if you're going to change members of a quartet, the ensemble will have a sound, and they would need to get the new player to kind of... the new player is going to change the sound somewhat, but if you replace a player with a carefully chosen new player, you can kind of approximate that sound or just make the adjustment to... the other sound. But here we have two players that have joined within 2 years of each other, and this is going to change the sound a lot. And in fact, the ensemble doesn't sound as slick and sort of flowing and melded and upholstered as it did in its really before 2018, to be honest. I have a lot of their recordings, and this one really does sound different. Now, it's not to say it's bad, but it's just not what I expected. Okay, let's go through these works, and I'll talk about what they sound like and what the works are about as well. The first work is Fanny Mendelssohn's only string quartet in E-flat major. Now, Fanny was trained just like her brother in the piano and in composition, but because of two reasons. First of all, she's a woman, and second of all, she's from a wealthy family. So those two things, just because she's a woman from a wealthy family, meant that she wasn't going to go out with those animals and live with the and make a life in composition with all these musicians. Mozart's father often warned him of the foibles of professional musicians. He didn't see them. He saw them as rather unsavory people, and some of them were quite unsavory. So, it's a sort of woman from a wealthy family really wasn't going to be seen in this kind of company in that era. But Fanny did do a lot of composing. She wrote mostly songs and also instrumental songs, sort of songs without words. She had a different name for them, though. But like Mendelssohn did, he called these Lieder ohne Worte, sorry. Lieder ohne Wörter. And Fanny had a similar but different name to these types of compositions as well. She had a real gift for melody, like her brother Felix. She didn't write many larger works, and in fact, this string quartet, which would be a large-scale work, is still pretty short. It doesn't really go on for very long. Each movement is around 4 or 5 minutes long. Okay, so this work was written in 1834, and it took her a while to write this. She started She had some of the original themes in 1829, and they were drafts of a piano sonata. So I guess she eventually changed her idea and went for the string quartet. Also, it's in E flat major, as I said, but it starts in C minor, which also would have been an unusual thing. This is really something that the Romantics really introduced into music, and Beethoven to an extent too. But he would usually go from the not the relative minor. This is the relative minor to the major. Beethoven would go to the I keep forgetting the name of this, when it's D minor and then goes to D major at the end. Like, there's a name for that. I can't remember. Parallel minor. There you go. Why can't I remember that? Because relative is sticking in my head. That's why. So this one starts in the relative minor and goes to the major. And when you do that, when you start in minor and go to major, you've got kind of a brighter sound at the end. Something positive has happened, because minor tends to have a darker feel to it. Okay, and then the E flat major is established at the end of the first movement, which is labeled Adagio ma non troppo. This is a really unusual way to start a string quartet. Usually you'd start it allegro, with a flowing, fast sort of rhythm. Adagio, andare, it's slower than walking. It's sort of it's sort of a slow tempo, sort of like a middle movement. And Adagio tends to evoke song, like melodies, something sung. Okay, so this movement is actually formally free and tonally adventurous, as we mentioned, with the C minor to E flat major. It's more like a fantasy than a sonata. It doesn't really have a development section in the middle. And part of the reason for that is it's pretty short. It clocks in at less than 5 minutes. Unusual. The first movement of a sonata is usually in a sonata form, and it'll usually go on for some time, because you have to play the themes and then repeat them at the end, and then they get developed in the middle. So it takes time to do all that, especially if you're a really creative composer. Okay, in the opening bars of this work, we hear an allusion to two other quartets in the same key. She acknowledges her debt to Beethoven, a debt that every Romantic composer had, by having her opening gesture allude to Beethoven's harp quartet, Opus 74, of 1809. Please, that's the name of the string quartet. It's nicknamed the harp quartet. There are no actual harps in it. It has that name because of the pizzicati themes, okay? But she's alluding to the beginning of that here. And second, she nodded to the beginning of her brother Felix's Opus 12 string quartet, which we don't hear on this album, of 1829. That would have been a good choice, actually, since she alludes to it. It's unfamiliar to me. A work even more closely related to Beethoven's music than Fanny's was. Short though this movement is, it's pretty dramatic, with brief outbursts of volume, a trick her whole generation learns from Beethoven. There's a lot of intimacy in the writing, too. When the textures thin out, it sounds really sort of tender, beautiful. And statements are compact and are quickly and effectively communicated. There's even a pregnant pause at about 3 minutes and 33 seconds that was unusual for music at the time, something Beethoven might have done, but it's pretty adventurous here. Okay, next we go to the second movement, Allegretto, which is a scherzo. A scherzo replaces a minuet. Beethoven started this too. And this particular scherzo has it says in the booklet, it has a slightly demonic quality to it, all right, which is relieved by the mock counterpoint in the middle section in C major. The C major, the counterpoint is a Beethovenian allusion to the third movement of his Fifth Symphony. Dun, 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 dun. Well, not that part, though. It's this middle rushing part. For me, the demonic quality that's mentioned in the booklet doesn't come out in this performance, which sounds slowish and careful. I thought this opening theme could have been attacked with more energy, and I think it probably would have, by the older members of, if the older version of the Takács Quartet were still together. I was hearing this group is still trying to find its balance, I find, with their new players, I felt, and I heard that for the first time here. The third movement, Romanze, is like a Lieder ohne Worte, which is, there's no umlaut there, Worte, okay, by her brother Felix. It's deeply expressive, so it's like a song without words. The opening is mournful and goes into an appealing, slightly weeping melody with gentle descents. It's very pretty. In the middle section, there are dramatic descending figures that I feel aren't put across with the power they require. The material sounds repetitive. There are a lot of the same sort of melodic figure repeated in different, like, parts of the scale. To me, though, when a composer does this, it's up to the ensemble to remedy the sound of the repetition. Otherwise, it gets boring. I don't think it's the fault of the piece, because it's meeting all of its formal aspects. The music quietens to soften more to something more eerie at the end, and the rhythm to this sounds too mechanical and measured to put the musical expression across. Dusenberg, the first violinist, is carrying most of the melodic interest, but I wonder if he feels hampered by his accompaniment here, because I've heard him play like these really flowing, soaring sort of melodies with this ensemble. I have a lot of older recordings of them with him on them. Okay, the fourth movement, Allegro molto vivace, is a conventional rondo. This starts in a lively way, with a lively figure in the upper strings acting as the rondo theme. It's not terribly memorable. It's more of like a figure than a melody. Usually a rondo theme has a folk-like melody, something that's easy to identify when it repeats. But this has something more athletic. There's some pretty exciting writing in between the theme. The movement moves along at full speed practically throughout, and I'm not getting the familiar blend I'm used to with this ensemble. The rhythmic playing is too careful. All right, next we get to the centerpiece, Felix Mendelssohn String Quartet in F minor, Opus 80. This is Felix's last string quartet. He wrote it to, as I mentioned before, to sort of sort through his feelings about his sister's death. And he himself died months after writing this, of the same thing that his sister died of. Weird. Okay, he also had a stroke at the age of 38.
Wow.
We've already outlived them both, Russ.
Yep.
People didn't live long there, but I think they lived much. They left a lot behind, which I sadly can't say for myself. I'm just going to leave a lot of CDs behind. That's really all. A lot of books, too. All right. For those unfamiliar with this work, it has a bit of the roiling quality of Schubert's Death and the Maiden Quartet's first movement. And it should have that kind of thing. It's very Beethovenian, really, but I kind of thought it had to have that kind of energy. The first movement is labeled Allegro Vivace Assai, and then Presto later on. So there's an introduction, and then the main section is Presto. The opening creates a good stormy mood, and the ensemble sound is slightly better here. The aggression that they're using here could have been used to good effect in the Fanny Mendelssohn quartet that we just heard. They were more careful with that one, and which is surprising because this one sounds more difficult to play, really. Maybe the Fanny Mendelssohn quartet was a little unfamiliar to them. It's not played often. It's starting to be, because a lot of women composers' music is being sought out now. We're starting to hear a lot of these quartets, and they're starting to get a performing tradition, which is really good to hear. The ensemble here in the Felix quartet, the ensemble might be more familiar with this work, but I'm still getting a sense of timekeeping over expression. I'm not hearing much flexibility, and after the Aumann too, I'm kind of getting really impatient with this sort of thing. The melodic lines lack expressive elasticity. This very urgent dramatic movement comes across as both dramatic and urgent, but not to the degree that it can. And in fact, if you want to hear the degree that it can come across, you should listen to the recording we heard last week, with the string orchestra. They really put this across with great urgency, and also a wider dynamic range because it's a string orchestra arrangement.
You got the bass in there too.
You got the bass too. It's unfair, really. Okay. Second movement, Allegro Assai. Let me see. This one has an aggressive opening as well. Again, I noticed that the repeated opening figure sounds the same each time. You want to color these a little bit, just subtly. And I don't need to tell a quartet like this that they would tell me that, because they've been at this much longer than I did. But again, with new members, it's hard to get that sort of comfortable feeling that you just know what everybody else is going to do, and it gives you they're going to react if you try something or something like that. Okay, so I think they haven't been playing, especially the newest member joined in 2020, and they probably didn't play live because of the COVID pandemic. Let me see. The sudden changes from loud to soft don't sound as sudden or surprising as they should either. Third movement, Adagio. Okay, this was where Felix's sister Fanny excelled as a composer, and I think he's the world of song because she wrote a lot of songs or melody or melodic works, one movement works that were like songs that were instrumentals, and this movement recalls that, and he may be recalling her music here. Again, there's something matter of fact about the phrasing as it's played by this particular quartet. No fault of Mendelssohn's. This is a moving piece of music that didn't move me as it should. The occasional dissonances just sound disturbing without carrying emotional weight. And the finale, Allegro molto, the roiling, begins again, but again, the same disappointing measuredness of all the phrases takes away any drama. This lacks elasticity that you would expect from an ensemble of this caliber. And this is a dramatic movement. The dissonant outcries sound kind of petulant here. They don't really sound painful as they should. This is a powerful string quartet that doesn't come across with the power built into it. Okay, now it might sound like I'm being kind of harsh, but like I've said, I've heard some of the best ever performances I've ever heard given by this same ensemble with different members, of course, and I'm not getting that here. It's falling kind of. It doesn't feel like there's any magic in this. It just sounds like they're, high level professionals playing, but I'm not getting that extra thing that you expect from an ensemble like this. Okay, we have one more quartet on this album. This is by Felix again. String Quartet in A minor, Opus 13. This is from 1827. So this is the year of Beethoven's death. This quartet also processes the Serioso Quartet of Beethoven, as well as his A minor, Opus 132, and B flat major, Opus 130 quartets. All worth hearing, by the way. Needless to say. You really should. This is something, how people say you got to know the Shakespeare plays, at least the outlines. Everybody should hear all the Beethoven symphonies and string quartets. They're just so important for Western music. And they're also kind of important for your spiritual development, too, if you're going to keep listening to them, because they really go into some territory that other composers haven't gone into since.
Yeah,
the string quartets.
And all of his piano works, too.
His piano sonatas
as well. You can listen to those over and over. Always get something new.
That's true, especially the late ones, which I'm still, to this day, I think I got those. I still struggle with those a little bit, and especially the string quartets. They have a lot of secrets in them that aren't easily you don't really kind of pick them up too easily. Yeah. Some of them are still puzzles for me. Anyway, Mendelssohn took a lot of inspiration for this work from his love song Frage, Ist es wahr? Opus 9, number 1. And it provides the overarching theme for the four movements with explicit references to it in the outer movements, 1 and 4, and implicit reminiscences of it in the inner ones, 2 and 3. This moves the quartet close to the genre of art song. Okay, so you're sort of, if you know the words to the song and you hear that melody played, it's sort of like these old, sort of the way a lot of old church music, the cantus firmus, was thought to carry the holiness of the words that it was set to. So you could play that, and the presence of the divine would be in that line as you kind of played other things around it. Okay, movement 1 starts Adagio, that's an introduction, and then Allegro Vivace is the main section. This particular performance is hampered by the same problems as the previous two. Harmonic figures that used to float now sound read off the page. That's pretty harsh. It doesn't sound like that bad. But it's a little disappointing given what this Quartet has done in the past. Even the occasional playful qualities come across as more stone-faced. This is a dramatic movement. The second movement, Adagio Nonlento, has measured phrasing. The gentler elements in this movement don't come across in the intimate way that they should. And I'm having a rough time listening to this at this point. Because again, you're hearing a whole... I didn't break these up. I just listened to the whole album straight through. And by the end, I was getting a little impatient with it, I have to say. Maybe it would have been better to just go back and listen to this later. There are beautiful elements in the score that aren't coming across. The third movement, Intermezzo, Allegro con molto, and then Allegro di molto. The opening section has an appealing melodic figure accompanied by pizzicati. I enjoyed that. Again, the middle section sounds too measured to provide much appealing contrast. It sounds kind of rascally, and I'd like to hear more humor in the playing here. The false cadence at the end is very appealing, but it's not convincingly put across by the ensemble. It should really come like a surprise. It was really nice, but again, a little too measured for me. The fourth movement, Presto, and then going to Adagio Nonlento, so it's fast going back to slow, which kind of gives you an idea of what he's thinking of here. Well, actually, no, that's not true. I'm still thinking of the previous work. Okay, this starts with fire, but the anguished cry from the violin doesn't come across with fire. There's good fleetness on the figuration in the upper strings, but the aggression and fire of this movement don't come across. So this is a good release with an interesting program, but I'm not hearing the magic that a quartet of this caliber can produce or used to produce and has produced in the past. It sounds like a struggle between different generations with nobody winning. The ensemble just isn't gelling, and again, I'm sure they will eventually once they get out and start playing. The program is so interesting to me, and this feels to me like a missed opportunity. So I'd say listen if you like the program, but I didn't think this was really the best sort of performances of these works.
I noticed the difference in the tone quality of the ensemble. For me, their recordings used to have this sort of signature sheen to the string blend that I always...
Sheen is a good word.
It was hard to describe. It just had that certain, identifiable sound to that, which seems to be altered now. Well, with two different players from those other recordings that I have, that's going to happen. And I couldn't quite put my finger on it, and I didn't, think of as exactly as you did about what's kind of missing. But I said that the overall level of expression isn't quite up to what I'm used to. Right. In a lot of their the recordings, you're really impressed by that next level of interpretation and sort of forcefulness of the emotions that they get out of the music. Here, it's not bad at all. It's, these are good performances because their technique is, always, top level. But that extra emotional sort of feeling I didn't really get from these, especially after having heard, the F minor number 6 last week.
Right. Same course, with me. That
not to compare the sonic impact of a larger ensemble in this, but I felt that especially the tempos and forcefulness of that performance last week was really kind of impressive. And here I wasn't moved as much. So maybe it's just going to take more time to develop, that same kind of expressiveness with new members. Yeah.
They need to get out and play like several nights a week.
Yeah, well,
I'm surprised that Andras Feyer is still kind of willing to do that. He's got to be in his 70s by now. Yeah. He's going to travel all around the world, probably feel jet lagged, got to give a performance. I don't know. I think it's a hard life at that age. He must really love it, though. All right, now my last pick was kind of made it worthwhile because I thought this was excellent. This is all 20th century music. And 21st century music, well, is it? I don't know. Anyway, the main works here are by Alfred Schnitka, who we've heard on this podcast before, but we haven't heard any of his vocal music. This is his Concerto for Choir and his 3 sacred hymns. And also, as a bonus, we get Arvo Pärt's 7 Magnificat antiphons, a set of works I really love. This is by the Estonian Philharmonic Chamber Choir, conducted by Kaspars Putnins. And it's on the Beast label. And this is an SACD. Oh, I didn't mention the Takács was on Hyperion. I gotta mention these things. You gotta mention the record labels. Anyway, the Alfred Schnitka was yeah, by the way, the Mendelssohn you won't be able to hear. Let's just sample it because Hyperion doesn't put their recordings on streaming services. But Beast does. Now, for me, this was an SACD, and I had access to surround sound, 5.1 channel stereo. And I'm not sure if this is 5.0 or 5.1, but 5.1 would mean there's a subwoofer. But it doesn't matter because this is a choir, and when the choir stops, you hear the decay of the sound in the church all around you, and it's just magical. This is a recording that's well worth hearing in surround, just for the little subtle.
That was one of the things I was going to say. I think this recording has the longest reverb decay that I've ever heard. Anything. It just goes on forever.
I thought it was magical. I liked it a lot. It sounds great in surround. Let's just say that.
Goes on forever.
It was probably recorded. I have it right here. I got to look. But I
was wondering because it's not on the Presto notes or anywhere or on the cover, so I was wondering where it was recorded.
Oh.
Like a catacombs somewhere.
Okay, I didn't send you that part, huh? Let me see. Recording. Man, I can't even see this. I got to get my... This is tiny. At the Niguliste Kirik St. Nicholas Church in Tallinn, Estonia.
Oh.
Okay, producer and sound engineer Jens Braun. Take 5 music production. So let's give them all credit. So this was recorded in a church. And it sounds like it too. It's got this big decay.
It's bigger than any church. Yeah, it just goes on forever.
I love churches though. I mean, I remember I went to a church in Paris, France one year, and I heard like Mozart's Clarinet Concerto. And it was a small ensemble, but the church, the reverb, the decay in the church was just too big for this work, you know. But if you have a giant choir in there, it's different. The works are written for that space.
I think it
works really well.
It works really well for this music because this is something different. It's sort of otherworldly, which is based on these sort of long, extended, open intervals, right? Well, you're going to get to all this, but I think this is the overwhelming impression. You get these open intervals which don't form, triads of major or minor all the time. Right. Then you get tones that are stacked on top of them, often creating really dense harmonies, and then things sort of shift and go into new directions, sometimes with dissonances, but having that extended natural reverb allows for the tones to keep blending, even once new notes are being sung. So you get this sort of hanging character to these sounds, and I think it actually helps in the performance of what's going on harmonically in this music.
Right. I should mention what you said, the whole decay in the church. I love that. And I love I'll just tell the audience, one of my favorite things in life is the sound of bells. I just love bells of all kinds, like chimes or like, European church bells. Like when the church bells ring in like, say, a European city, I just kind of stop and listen because I just love the sound so much. I just can't keep going. And even these gigantic Buddhist like bells that we have here with the rich like overtones that just go on forever. It's really incredible. I just love it all. Bells are one of my favorite things on earth. Maybe I don't know if ringing is the right thing, but I like the whole like decay of it and how it. And that's one of the reasons why I love Arvo Pärt's music, but we'll get to that when we talk about his. First, we have Alfred Schnitka. Now, first of all, I want to mention, by the way, this is the second choral release by this ensemble on Bis of music by these two composers. The first came out in 2018, and that one's pretty excellent, too. So if you like this, you're going to want to seek that one out, too. And I think you are going to like this, unless there's something that puts you off about it. I actually have friends who say they like Baroque music, but they don't like the harpsichord. And my response is always, well, then you don't like Baroque music, because that's all you're going to hear.
Yeah,
you know?
It's strange.
It's like
strange
saying, I like rock music, but I don't like the drums. I don't like the electric guitar. You know what I mean? I don't understand
Curious.
that. Anyway. Yeah, I don't know what they're talking about there. Anyway, the works on this disc, they are Concerto for Choir and 3 Sacred Hymns by Alfred Schnitka and 7 Magnificat antiphons by Arvo Pärt. They all document the resurgence of Christianity in the last decades of the Soviet Union. And I mean, I wasn't there, but just judging from the music that came out of this must have been a magical thing, because the religious music that came out of here, and really out of Estonia afterwards, by Pärt and by other composers, has a lot of, it doesn't sound formal really in any way. It sounds really heartfelt, like these people really believed. You know, it gives you the same feeling that you have when you go to Europe and you see those gigantic European cathedrals, and you're like, oh boy, this, you know, just the work put into this, and the design is just, these are people who definitely believed in God. You know, there'd be no other reason to do something like this. Anyway, both composers became Orthodox Christians, so Russian Orthodox, in the 1970s when state restrictions on the church were gradually relaxed. Remember, the Soviet Union was an atheist state. This is one of the tenets of communism. And when you keep people away from the faith for a while and then they're allowed to go back to it, I don't know, real magic happens. At least it does here. I loved this entire album. And it was also kind of unique to my ear because it doesn't sound like a Western Mass by any means, either of these. So the Orthodox has a bit more spice in it, let's say, as far as the music goes. Okay, the biggest work on this disc is the first one, Alfred Schnitke's Concerto for Choir, written in 1984 to 1985. This was around the time where I first heard of Alfred Schnitka, because there was some sort of exchange of Soviet composers with American composers, and they came to Boston, of all places, where I was going to school at the time. Actually, it was probably a little after this particular work, but he was one of the first like contemporary composers. He's now dead, but at the time he was still alive, and he was one of the first contemporary composers I got interested in. This work draws on 19th century developments and combines chant-inspired melodies, this is from the Russian Church, the Orthodox, with rich romantic harmonies. So you want to think Tchaikovsky and Rachmaninoff here. It's trying to kind of bridge two worlds. The texts are by the medieval Armenian poet Gregory of Narek, who lived 951 to 1003, and they come from his magnum opus, the Book of Lamentations. Those texts were written in classical Armenian, but Schnitka here uses modern Russian translations by Naum Grebnev, give him credit. And a humanistic individualism informs the texts, ideal for our times, really, with the poet directly expressing his emotions and often writing in the first person. And these texts, I found, were very moving, especially when they were set the way they are here. They're worth looking at. Now, they all have Russian titles, which I am not going to allow you to mock me by pronouncing. I'll give you the English translations. Okay, the first one, O Master of All Living. This is the first movement of 4 in this pretty big work. This is the most meditative of the 4 movements, and the melodic lines evoke ancient chant. Boy, you're just right in this wonderful, like, churchy space right from the beginning of this. It's really hypnotic, but with an added feeling of introspection expressed by the dissonant harmonies which occur occasionally. Beautiful recorded sound on this, as is often the case in choral recordings, especially on SACD. Somehow they really capture this well. The Russian text, by the way, if you have the booklet, is fairly easy to follow due to the voices all singing the text together, though in harmony. Okay, for me, the religiosity in these works come through strongly in the 21st century. These were composers who lived under enforced atheism for their entire lives until the 1970s, and even then there were restrictions. Once the Soviet bloc fell, their spirituality burst out in music, and this is a gorgeous example from Schnitka. I want to also say, thankfully, the booklet text is written in Roman characters, not in Russian Cyrillic, because if they were, I wouldn't be able to follow them. So it's kind of more of a phonetic Roman thing. Now, this probably might be a disappointment to native Russian speakers who know how to read Cyrillic. I mean, that would be their alphabet. But I was really grateful that these were Roman. I could follow the text, and it was quite easy to follow. Now, I've known this about Pärt. Arvo Pärt wrote a lot of religious music and still does. But I'm glad we're hearing Schnitke's response to this lightning of strictures on religion. Schnittke can be dissonant, but here tradition comes through strongly. There are some gorgeous harmonies in this movement, especially when the high sopranos hold stratospherically high notes and the overtones of the lower voices are allowed to fill in the space. That is so beautiful. He leaves a lot of space in the middle for those like lower voices to the voice to just the overtones to fill in the space. I just love that so much. Second movement is called This Collection of Songs Where Every Verse, that's the first line. This is more dramatic than the first movement, and there's an insistent pulse in the basses which the movement builds over, and it eventually culminates the movement in a 17-part climax, so the voices are singing 17 different parts. There's some pretty cool meaning, wow, that sounded cool, but dark and harsh harmonies over the pulsating bass, making the texture sound like you're listening to a vinyl record that melted in the sun. You know, that kind of thing.
Falling, yeah.
Yeah, that was really cool, I thought.
Yeah, and it ends. It ends sounding to me like a human organ, like the stacked effect of all the pipes and the way they faded out.
Right.
To me, I went from voice to sort of listening to a human organ ensemble almost. Yeah, it's very interesting effects in this
was
one.
An interesting movement in general, actually. There's some highly appealing sudden changes of vocal textures in this movement, where one group of voices will hand off the melody to another group, so sopranos to tenors, for example, or where text sung by men's low voices will be taken over by higher women's voices entirely. These quick changes of timbre. Slightly adventurous, but beautiful, especially due to the text, which asks God to give salvation to all who read or hear the writer's verses. And he says the verses are full of suffering. So even the text is very moving to me, and the music only enhances that. And this ends with the same Amen that we started with. The third movement is actually the first to be written. It's called To All Who Grasp the Meaning. This is the movement the rest of the concerto was expanded from. It was premiered in Istanbul, Turkey, of all places, by Valery Polyansky and the USSR Ministry of Culture Chamber Choir. Polyansky encouraged Schnitka to expand the work, and the complete concerto was premiered by the same ensemble in Moscow in June 1986. That's only 4 years before the Soviet Union fell. And I think Gorbachev would have been the premier at the time. I didn't look it up, though. It's a resigned prayer with repeated figures creating a trance-like effect. It's the second longest movement at just over 11 minutes. And this has a long text like the first movement and moves through it rather quickly. There's some gorgeous melisma again from a solo soprano. Melisma is when you have one vowel sound that you sing on different notes. You hear this a lot in church music. Okay. And we heard that from time to time in the first two movements, and this really drew my ear here. There's some fantastic harmonies in this movement as the lower men's voices chant and the women's voices sing weeping figures in odd harmonies above in the middle of the movement. A weeping figure would be something gently descending. That kind of thing. There's a cool chromatic ascent inside the 6-minute mark, too. It just happens once. Keep an ear out for that. There's a kind of vocal thickness to Russian choral works that we hear throughout this work, but they came to mind for me especially in this movement, like paint being slathered on a wall or canvas really thickly. So these voices are really amassed here. And also, like you said about the organ at the end of the second movement, and had that same effect. The fourth movement, and the last one, is called Complete This Work Which I Began in Hope. This movement returns to the contemplative mood of the first, with similar chants and dissonances, which are all dispelled at the end with an ethereal major triad. unusual to hear in the 20th century.
Yeah, and those are
the major triad.
Amens at the end are rather organ-like to me to hear that. They just fade out with the Amen, Amen, and then you're at peace.
Yeah, this is a pretty short movement. It's only about just over 4 minutes, and it's kind of a bookend to the first movement. At the ending triad, we can clearly hear some of the spectacularly low, rich bass notes sung by the lowest voices of this choir, and that's a big wow. This is a gorgeous ending, and with the sopranos calmly floating the higher notes of the ending chord. Two of the magical things that Russian choirs, this is an Estonian choir, but I guess the satellite Soviet countries too have this quality. They have those, what they call the black bass, this really deep bass voice. It kind of makes them... Russian choirs are one of the choirs in the world that really sound unique, along with English choirs and American choirs, especially gospel choirs. They have a unique sound, and Russia's one of those. And I just love those really low bass notes, and also those sopranos like that can get really high up. I like them together. Okay. Next we have another work by Schnitka, 3 Sacred Hymns for Mixed Choir. This is much shorter, and it comes from 1984. These 3 works evoke Orthodox chant, and they were written for the conductor, the same guy as above, Valery Polyansky. They set prayers from the Orthodox prayer book. The texts are in Church Slavonic, the ancient language of Orthodox liturgy, but Schnitka writes them in the Cyrillic script of modern Russian. We get them in the booklet in Roman letters, thankfully, as I said, okay, and with an English translation. Again, I hope that doesn't let down our Russian listeners. Easier for us in the West to follow. Okay, the first movement, the first piece. Hail Mary, full of grace. Should I try to say this? Bogorodice Djeva Raditya. Something like that. Hail Mary, it's Hail Mary. This is set for double chorus. The second imitates the first, but in a lower key. So we get some mild dissonances. This is a really cool effect, I have to say. Because the second, it's almost like in canon, but it's not. It's really interesting. I like the sound it makes. It sounds like waves gently undulating, one layer overlapping another. And this is a very short movement at 1 minute and 33 seconds. The second movement, or the second prayer to be set, is called Lord Jesus, Gospodi Jes Christ. This begins quietly, gradually building in range and dynamic to a powerful climax, which happens pretty quickly, as this movement is only 1 minute and 15 seconds long. It doesn't end on the loudest note, interestingly enough, which comes slightly before. And the next one, Our Father, this is pronounced either Okanesh or Ochanesh. I don't really know which one is correct. This is the longest and most... Actually, it's not pronounced anything like either of them, probably. But there you go. Longest and most elaborate setting of the set. This is harmonically adventurous, and it uses a range of 19th century progressions and ends with an emphatic but harmonically ambiguous Amen. This one passes from quiet to loud in crescendoing and decrescendoing waves, and very beautiful. Okay, after that we get a very famous work by Arvo Pärt, 7 Magnificat Antiphons. This has been recorded many times. Pärt is a contemporary composer. He is the most often performed living composer, and has been for maybe a decade now. Every year he gets named that. This one was written in 1988 and then revised in 1991. And it's for mixed choir, soprano, alto, tenor, bass, a cappella. I never get tired of hearing this work. All right, now, Arvo Pärt has a style of writing called tintinnabuli. It's an extension of the harmonic practices of Orthodox choral music. He wrote these works in West Berlin in 1988, and this work, with the tintinnabuli written into German language and Catholic liturgy, is an East-West hybrid. The text derived from the evening prayer liturgies of the Roman Catholic Church for the 7 days leading up to Christmas Eve, 17th to the 23rd of December. Each antiphon gives a name for Christ used in Old Testament prophecies. Now, this particular piece, you would chant these prayers in the days coming up to Christmas. But here, the way the piece is written, it's really meant to be performed all at once because it's short enough and because of it's got a structure that kind of is very satisfying. It's symmetrically structured with movements 1, 4, and 7 set for full choir. And the other movements, the textures are reduced. The low range of the movement, 2 for male voices, movement 2, is reflected in movement 6, while the high range of movement 3 for female voices returns in movement 5. So it's all balanced. It's nice to hear it all performed in one evening. The work is in pairs tintinably style, as I mentioned. And what this is one voice sings a melodic line, so like a song line, while the other holds a note from the underlying harmony, and it creates a bell-like resonance. Please, we don't hear the attack of the bell. We hear the sort of resonating bell sound afterwards. So tintinnabuli, I know this word from Edgar Allan Poe. I think he may have invented it in his poem, The Bells. But that's what it is. It's that kind of resonating sound that these harmonies make. It's really beautiful. I just love it. Changes in pitch in the melodic line are linked to the stressed syllable of each word, which is usually set at the top of a stepwise ascent. The technique evokes the recitation-like quality of liturgical chant and aligns the music closely with the text. The work sounds simple, but a lot of complex thought went into this. All right, let's go through these. O Weisheit is the first movement of the 7. This text is a prophecy about the wisdom of Christ that will fill the world from one end to the other. And because of that, we get expansive choral textures that express that breadth of the world being filled from one end to the other, as our ears are filled from one end to the other with these expansive textures. The setting is quiet and light with mostly high voices, and the tenors sound like the lowest voices, or their high basses. I think they're tenors. The tone of the work is coaxing, like it's kind of trying to encourage this wisdom to come to us. The second movement, and my personal favorite, is O Adonai, which is a name for God used in the Old Testament. It looks back to the time of Moses, and the sound of this movement is deliberately archaic. The tenors and basses trade off melody and accompaniment. The accompaniment evokes the medieval organum style of plain chant. And for me, this is the most spectacular movement, but I've heard recordings where the quality of the bass voices really nail your feet to the floor. That doesn't happen here. They don't really just bottom out. They're kind of underplayed here, focusing more on the melodic continuity of the piece. And no problem with that, but you just don't get that wow kind of to it. Okay, it's still a really gorgeous performance. No worries there. Next, O Spross aus Isais Wurzel, the root of Jesse, O root of Jesse, or tree of Jesse, you can call it. This illustrates the idea of growth through continually rising phrases, and all women in this particular one. The previous movement was the all-male movement, and this one's all-female. Fourth movement, O Schlüssel Davids, O Key of David. This is the work's central climax. It's the middle movement. It's a hymn of praise in broad textures and continuously loud dynamics. This connects to the previous movement with the men's verses suddenly filling in the bottom. So we get the end of the women's movement, and then suddenly the men's voices come in at the bottom. It's a really beautiful transition. This is a startlingly loud movement with clear harmonies throughout. Movement 5, O Morgenstern, O Morning Star, is a contrast to the fourth movement. It's quiet, and the harmonies alternate between major and minor, giving the piece a nebulous, ethereal effect, very appealing. Listen to that major-minor change. It happens throughout. It's really nice. Movement 6, O König aller Völker, O King of the Nations. Völker, I hope I said that right. This gives the impression of many people through the voices singing the same music at different speeds. So King of the Nations. We're hearing the nations in this one. The sopranos sing at half the tempo of the tenors. In this particular piece, it says here the sopranos in the booklet, but they sound like mezzos to me. They're sort of lower women's voices. And the basses, too. The tenors and basses sing the same text twice to conclude with the sopranos. The lower voices stand out, making it easy to follow the text, despite all this overlapping. And the seventh movement, called O Emmanuel. This is the most diverse movement in terms of textures and dynamics. The text is sung 3 times. This is the only time this happens in this work. And the first time it's sung very quietly, the second time loudly, and the third is a contemplative reflection. The tintinnabuli effect is applied differently each time, but the final section returns to the technique as it is employed in the first movement, a quiet invocation of the opening textures to draw the cycle to a close. So we get the word cycle is well used here because this piece does sort of make a circle. It connects to the beginning again. There's beautiful singing throughout, but overall, this particular performance is taken a little faster than others I've heard. It's none the worse for that, but these sounds are so beautiful that I like it performed a little more slowly so I can really linger on those gorgeous harmonies. You don't get enough time, I feel, on this to revel in the wonderful harmonies, but nevertheless, this is a really good performance. If you're lucky enough to hear this album in surround, you'll really enjoy the decay of voices in the space all around you. As I said, you get the sense that you're in a big church, which you actually are, and the sound decays in the air for full seconds after the singing has stopped. There's some harsh-sounding harmonies in this piece, but they're balanced by the tranquility and consonance of other sections or movements, and they're good for your ear. It's like broccoli for your ear. It's good. Okay? Don't let that bother you. Enjoy this. This is a fantastic performance, recording. It's great music. Highly recommended.
Yeah, these are more meditative, I would say, and the influence and emphasis of chant is more apparent. So you have some more static kind of lines in some of the lyrics that are going on, focus on the lyrical content, and then they develop into kind of more of like a hymn-like quality, but still have sometimes surprising, moderately dissonant kind of phrases. But as you say, the overall sort of tranquility and spaciousness of it makes it easy to listen to. So, yeah, it's kind of a nice pairing with the Schnittke. And, very interesting kind of sound world that you're transported into here. There's nothing quite like this in the vocal quality, the sense of space, and then the real modern openness of the sound. You're in a different world of voice and song here.
Very Eastern European Russian, the Russian Orthodox Church, or the Orthodox Church, you would say. Yeah,
it does focus your energy in a spiritual way, kind of inward in a way, and then it opens your ears to the sort of resonances in the sound. So, yeah, very unique.
Yeah, well said. I liked this a lot.
Yeah.
And if you like it, there's another one released 3 years before. Check that one out too, on the same label by the same ensemble.
Wow, I'm all just thinking of listening to that again. I've got me all meditating.
It was really,
it was good.
That'll be on my list. They came out in October, I think, 2021. I'm still listening to 2021 records, although the 2022 ones are starting to slowly creep into the collection here.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that brings us to the jazz portion of the podcast. And today we're going to take kind of a journey. Well, the first release is on Riverboat Records. We're going to need more than a riverboat for tonight's journey. I think you're going to need a larger craft. And this one is called Djawala. And this is by Anouar Kaddour Sharif. So we're going to be kind of taking a journey along the Mediterranean-bordered countries, and then we're going to go to the other side and go back to New York at the end. Anyway, Sharif is originally from Sétif in Algeria, and he's a multi-instrumentalist who studied the classical music traditions of North Africa, performing with lots of Eastern Algerian groups, and he developed a deep interest in Arab Andalusian music and worked on his composition and also singing along with his instrumental playing.
And he's got a really nice voice, too, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does have a really good voice,
really appealing.
Which he puts on 2 of the tracks here. However, he left his native Algeria a few years ago, and he's still quite young. He's in his 20s yet, but he settled in Switzerland. It's a big contrast there. So this has become his new musical environment, and he's now working on combining these kind of Arabic-type sounds with jazz, and his instrument of choice these days is the Algerian Mandel. And on this album, we've got a unique ensemble. One of the things I'm always interested in, sort of modal influence of jazz with other cultures.
Me too. It's like modes in general. Just church music always has modes too, so I'm always into that.
And then a lot of sort of this Middle Eastern or Northern African influenced music. They, for some reason, I don't know what the tradition is, but they bring in the bass clarinet. So whenever I see bass clarinet, that's another +1 for I want to listen to it because it's a cool instrument, right? So we've got some bass clarinet on here too. And also, as I said, he adds some of his vocals in here too. So this has caught my attention, and it turned out to be a kind of interesting exploration of Arabic music and jazz. Now, I was interested in this instrument as well. So the Algerian Mandel, it's not an ancient instrument. It's actually a modern kind of creation to fit certain types of instruments. And so I looked it up. It's so this is a steel string kind of fretted instrument that resembles what we know as a mandolin. This one is actually quite a bit bigger, I think. Would be like in a tenor range of mandolins. And so it's basically the European mandola that was redesigned in Algeria. And I think it goes back to the 1930s. Italian luthier sort of made up this new design based on recommendations from Algerian musicians. And there's a lot of variety in it. You can have 8, 10, 12 strings. A lot of them are doubled. And then some of them have additional frets, so you can get quarter tones, depending on the music you want to play. And then you can tune it differently. You can tune it in a guitar tuning, a traditional kind of tuning, E, A, D, G, B, E. You can tune it like an oud. You can tune it like a mandocello, whatever kind of music you want to play. So it seems to be kind of, an adaptable music for different types of scales, sorts of music. So it makes it kind of interesting. So here Sharif is on the Algerian Mandel, and as I said, he sings on 2 tracks. We've got Clement Munier on bass clarinet, Hans Juncker drums, and Antoine Brochot on double bass, which makes an interesting combination. Now, it's really hard to explain in the same way as listening to classical or kind of traditional jazz what you're hearing. And so doing
especially with all the changing meters.
Yeah, the meters and the modes. So, you get your counting cap on and try to figure out what's going on. And as soon as you got to figure it out, it's changed in often a different direction. Right. So it's very rhythmically kind of ethereal and changing music. But that's what makes it interesting. Track 1 on this recording, Sans Pap. It starts with some repeated unison figures with the bass clarinet and mandolins. That happens a lot on this album. They'll be working together on a melodic figure before going into divergent things with the different instruments. It gets a fast 8-beat dance feel that develops. Drum toms and fills and like kind of flurries in the two instruments, and some slower triplet figures as the melody goes on, so the rhythm changes up. It transforms into a lighter kind of lilting melody, still with the mandol working together with the bass clarinet. And the bass clarinet gets some kind of nasty snarls in there too, with a new accented rhythm section. And they get back to the earlier section, and then the fast dance feel again to take it out. So it's quite a rhythmic ride on the first track to start things out. Kind of like a musical water slide with lots of turns in it. Track 2 is called Albatross. This one begins with a rubato mandol and gets some kind of dove-like cries. I guess he's doing that on a bass clarinet. Can you do that? That's what it sounds like, almost bird-like. And then underneath you get some subtle bass bowing. A slow rhythmic 4-beat develops with the mandol and clarinet working together again here. The bass clarinet then blows out some of these really cool double-time 16th note figures over arpeggios and strumming on the mandol. Is really working up to kind of a frenzy here. The drums and bass kick in at the double time, and there's a new melody on the mandol and clarinet. Then there's a slower transition section before more of the fast melody again. Then it breaks back into the slower tempo, and the clarinet explores some kind of independent lines before the tune comes to a close. Again, lots of things happening, turns on a dime, very interesting changes. 3, we've got an interesting title, Savage Butterfly.
Seems like a oxymoron.
Yeah. Here the mandol plays a chord and works into some rapid figures in free time as the bass and bass clarinet supply some longer tones. Cymbals set out a tempo, and the bass adds a bottom riff which gradually builds into a modal melody shared by the clarinet and mandol with some rhythmic breaks. Meunier easily switches register on the bass clarinet depending on the line. He's, it'd be really high and then, down low, and he seems to be very agile on that. A new fast 6, or it depends how you count this, or 3-beat groove develops on this one with the clarinet soling and Sharif adding some vocalizations in there too. There's a cool bass line for the bass clarinet and bass to work together, and then Sharif joins in on top of it. They all drop out and let Juncker work on some cool drum beats for a while. Then they build back in with some stop time phrases over the drums, with a final line with the bass clarinet digging down really low. Whenever you have bass clarinet, you want to hear that kind of chest resonating register, and you get to hear that here a bit. Now we're going to get Sharif doing some vocals on the appropriate titled For Call of the Night. The bass starts this one out with some modal lines that feature intervals. Get some sparse cymbals and mandol to fill in just before Sharif adds the vocals. The beat is slow, kind of like a dirge, and Sharif's vocal have a very mournful quality. He's very kind of soulful voice. He adds nice kind of tremolo figures on the mandol and spots, and Boursault's bass carries most of the beat with just kind of tom accents from Juncker.
Yeah, the voice is understated but very appealing. I liked it right away. I was like, wow,
Yeah. I don't know what he's singing about, but it drew me in. 5, Scirocco. So it starts with a tricky mandol figures, and then a fast 6-beat rhythm feel develops with the others joining in. The melody develops with stops for alternating mandol and bass clarinet inside of it. The rhythm dissolves for some free time mandol modal jamming, and then drums add some light fills. And a new slow 4-beat emerges with a bass clarinet melody. Fast mandol triplets and subdividing in the bass transforms the beat into the fast 6 again, and it charges to the end. 6, Autumn Occidental. This is kind of a slow loping theme with bass clarinet and mandol to start it out. Bowed bass adds kind of thickness below that. Then on a repeat, a slow beat emerges with kind of a bass heartbeat feel and drum toms. And the bass clarinet and nice tremolo figure in the mandol carry the melody. There's a break, and then the mandol comes in with repeated fast figures that wouldn't sound out of place in like a heavy metal band over a syncopated beat. You get that kind of intensity to this line. Right. The bass clarinet solos and lets out some cries over the new pattern. Eventually joins in the fast figure with the mandol before a quick, slow change up and then a fast ending. Always keeping you on your toes in this music.
Yeah, I also want to say it's funny that I actually wrote the word, this piece lopes forward slowly. You even used the word loping, too.
Loping,
it's really funny how we heard that rhythm as loping.
Mm.
Yeah, it's
just
that could be a new technical word, maybe.
Loping. Track 7 is A True Lie. This seems to follow a meter of 7 beats and then 6. Figure that one out. It took me a while to figure out what was going on. See if you can count it. Yeah. The mandol and drum toms start it, and then the bass clarinet joins in, and the volume kicks up. There's a middle section to the melody of first descending and then ascending lines. Then the mandol has some muted kind of sitar-like plucking. He's muting the strings. He really changes the tonal quality on the original pattern with high notes on the bass clarinet over some plinky kind of percussion. Then a new groove comes in over some evil-sounding bowed bass, and they lay the original patterns back over it until the end. So, again, there's a lot of weird things going on, but they all sound very cool. But, I don't know, 7 beats, then 6. It doesn't happen very often in Western music. Track 8,
Virgule, which means a comma.
Yeah.
In French.
This one starts with a backbeat groove on the drums. Bass clarinet and mandol play a tricky syncopated and angular line in unison over the top. This piece has more of a major key tonality to it than the other compositions. The mandol and clarinet trade off some doodling and tremolo playing over the groove. It turns more minor and modally in kind of approach as they improvise simultaneously for a bit before a new modal version of the angular theme returns and then changes back to the original tonality feel for a final time through. So kind of a different harmonic feelings and implications on this one.
Kind of wondering about that title, comma, too, if they're like pauses.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder why he called it that. It kind of reminds me of when I had this teacher once who explained how you could change the meaning of a sentence just by placing a comma in it. And we see a lot of these on the internet now, but he gave the expression like the sentence, "What's that in the road ahead?" And then he put, "What's that in the road, comma, ahead?"
Okay. Right.
I never forgot that lesson. I don't know.
Yeah. Could be. Those commas are where these sort of modes change in the piece.
I'd like to know. Maybe they'll write to us. Because sometimes these guys write to us. It'd be cool.
Yeah.
Let us know.
Yeah,
if you
let us know. Let us know how my analysis is off base.
Yeah, these rhythms.
Yeah. And so track 9, Amaret Eriam.
Yeah, I'm not going to try to say that for you.
Yeah, all right. We'll leave it be. This one's got a slow 3-beat figure that's introduced. I don't know, what is it? Sounds like a kalimba to me.
Yeah, I said thumb piano, which is
that's
kalimba. That's the official name for
and
kalimba's the official name for that.
An ostinato bass line is laid down. The mandol comes in on top with lots of cool modal jamming going on here. Yeah. Sharif sings the yearning melody that has, they're almost like little appoggiatura figures, that descend and go down. Very cool.
Resolving the chord, kind of.
Yeah. Bass clarinet joins in with the mandol between the phrases. Then the bass gets to jam out over some light hand tapping percussion, and the mandol and clarinet join in underneath with a riff. The bass clarinet and mandol work into an energetic unison angular line that carries the energy to the end. Yeah, this is a really engaging recording. It's got an intriguing blend of instruments. The modes and rhythmic meters keep you interested in trying to figure out what's happening. And then as soon as you think you've got what's going on, it's in a different direction. So there's a lot of spontaneity, freshness to it. And Sharif's vocals add some unique character in some spots. I found there's something different, kind of in between worlds. It has a jazzy spirit, but also this unique instrumentation, African modes going on here. It's intriguing. Give it a listen.
Yeah, I found this appealing like all the way through, and I mean, what more can you ask for? You have these unique sounding instruments that you usually don't hear if you live in the West like us.
Yeah.
We live in Japan, but I mean, we were familiar with Western instruments, and then there's a bass clarinet too. Oh man, I mean, what more can you ask for? Also, you have the changing rhythms to keep your intellect active. Mm-hmm. I mean, this album hits the whole body. Fantastic recorded sound, I thought too. I thought all the instruments came out with a really rich tone. So just beautiful sound from the players, and the mics really picked them up well. The engineer did well on this. This is actually of all the things you've talked about so far this year, this is the second one I'm actually going to buy. The other one was the Bill O'Connell one.
Oh yeah.
So I got so these are my two purchases from this year. I really like this one a lot.
Right.
Yeah.
See that, Mr. Sharif, you've at least sold one new record.
Yeah, well, it's already he's already got the money for it. Apparently, he's already bought it, but I don't have it yet. It hasn't been shipped.
Yeah, I like this one. I might add this one to my collection too, as well as the next recording. This one I just saw on a list, and
I really liked all three of these, by the way, that you picked this week. So, but I don't know if I'm going to get all three of them. I got to see.
So we're going to take that, not the river boat, but the Mediterranean boat, and we're going to sail it all the way over to the end of the Mediterranean to Israel. Now, we've had some Israeli jazz or jazz via Israel on the podcast before. We had the jazz pianist Roy Moore last year, who's now based in New York, but he had a really nice recording last year. And we also had the bassist, Tel Aviv-based bassist, Shea Hazan.
Yeah, I remember that.
And that was kind of a cool, groovy and so now we've got another Israeli musician, and this is a debut album, and for that it's quite impressive, called Waking the Heart on Ubuntu, which features a lot of up-and-coming artists and as a record label, and this is Nadav Berkovitz. And so, as I said, this is his debut, and he's got a lot of musical influences from obvious straight-ahead jazz music to Middle Eastern and sort of Northern African rhythms, but also Afro-Cuban music. And apparently, looking over his bio, he made a trip to Cuba to sort of expose himself to that musical environment. And on this recording here, he's got some of the best Israeli jazz musicians joining in with him. And especially, I was impressed by the trumpeter who I've heard before, Itamar Borakov. Fabulous trumpet sound. On tenor sax, we've got Yuval Drabkin. We've got guitar on 2 tracks, Omri Bar Giora. On bass, Oz Yehile. And drums, Shai Yuval. And all original compositions by Berkovitz. So,
and they're all really impressive as well.
They're all really good.
Really sunk into all of these. I'm kind of not sure if I want this one or not. I liked it though a lot.
Yeah, I'm going to pick this one up. I really liked the overall vibe and creative nature on this album. So the first tune is called The Dream. This starts out with rolling kind of piano chords and a reverby guitar notes. that are joined by some drums and bass tones. And then Berkovitz works into this kind of C minor 6/8 chord progression. It really sets an atmosphere for this tune. Sax and trumpet blow some phrases before starting in on the intriguing minor melody that develops here. Djawala adds nice cymbals in the background. They go around the tune once again. The pattern moves into a tenor sax solo by Drabkin. He works in and out of the modes implied by the minor changes, creates more tension with some shrieking notes that are really cool. The melody has a nice cadence that turns around at the end. So it gets you sort of into this kind of modal kind of trance, but then the turnaround brings you back into more regular tonality with it. The time stops, and Berkovitz keeps a wash of sound going with some drums behind for Borokov to start blowing a rubato solo. His tone is really great here. It's fat and thick. It's very modal based improvisation, and it sounds like a desert cry. You can imagine it's not even a trumpet here. The beat reemerges as Borokov finishes his solo. Djawala is up next on guitar. He's got a really fat-toned, echoey thing going on with his guitar that sounds cool, and he has a really melodic solo here. And then they all join in for a melody restatement and repeat it to finish up with some free blowing at the end as they wrap it up. So a nice opening track that sort of sets the mood for this album. Track 2 is Ras, and this is a Borokov feature on his trumpet. It starts out with a breathy, warm modal call over, again, rolling slow piano chords. A slow rubato melody is played by the trumpet and bass, and next by the piano and bass. The trumpet and piano take it in unison next for an interesting trade-off as it picks up a beat in 3 and gets faster from the addition of drums. Borokov solos keeping the modal character in his melodic lines and runs, and Berkovitz takes a solo next. He focuses on rhythmic figures and chiming notes. It works into a new repeating rising progression of chords, and then things settle down and get quiet for Borokov to blow a new melody. Then the beat gets some syncopation, and then slows for some final notes from Borokov over the chords. So nice trumpet feature here. 3, España. So here we're going to get some different influences. Starts with an ostinato bass line with motion. It gets joined by tight drums and syncopated chords by Berkovitz. He handles the melody as well as the chordal things, because this is just a trio work here. It's got a Spanish feel, as suggested by the title. We get some tasty bass work between the piano phrases, and Djawala keeps things interesting, moving around the drum set. Berkovitz shows off some more here with some of his Cuban influences. He has some really driving chords and rhythms, but also softer lines that have a nice touch for contrast. Yehile gets a busy but tasty rhythmic bass solo. Someone shouts out their approval during it, so it's they're having fun here. Djawala has a drum solo next, showing some power and dexterity, and then Berkovitz brings in the chord vamp as Djawala continues as a segue back to the melody. They play around a repeating phrase with some drum gaps for fun at the end. So here you can see his influence with some Cuban and Spanish themes. Track 4 is a song for Abbey. It's a soft piano intro. Djawala is back with some crying tones on guitar. A medium tempo beat gets formed, and then the guitar takes the melody. The rhythm has a feeling of pushing ahead throughout the tune. It quiets down for the start of a guitar solo. He stitches together rising and falling lines with some fast 16th note licks, and the band brings up the intensity as he goes on. Berkovitz solos next. He keeps it rhythmic here as well, focusing on intervals in the solo, and works up to some nice percussive chords. Then a kind of new perpetual melodic line develops in unison in the piano and guitar as the drums drop out for a little bit. Then everyone comes back in, the beat builds, and they push that line into a new final section that settles out quietly with some spacey guitar and piano tones. Then we've got track 5, Eurydice, who I guess was the wife of Orpheus, right?
Yeah.
This starts with a slow sequence of 4 chords on piano for an intro. It's added to by bass and light percussion. Drabkin comes in with some breezy sax on the melody, and then Berkovitz plays some chords here after that. The sax improvises over that and creates a light flowing effect until Drabkin digs in and gets more intense in attack and volume, working up to some double-time figures. Berkovitz gets a solo here, and the drums and rhythm take up more swinging rhythms sometimes, switching up with him when he plays cross rhythms there. So it's a nice interplay going on. Drabkin comes back with the airy, gentle melody as they return to the original tempo and rhythmic feel. Things work up in intensity again, and the swinging feel and Drabkin gets some more intense soloing space before things quiet down and go out on a kind of a bluesy vamp to the end of the tune. Track 6, Ensof. So slow, spaced-out rolled piano chords make the intro with some cymbal textures and drums added. Berkovitz gets a new rhythm going to start the main tune. The drums play a subdivided beat, and the bass has a syncopated 2-beat feel, over which Berkovitz works out rhythmic phrases and accented chords. Mid-tune, they work up into a sequence of rhythmic patterns and then some minor modal scales. The drums and bass drop out for a bit. Well, Berkovitz comes up with a new sequence of rhythmic figures that they join back in on and then build up to the final section, which slows and gets quieter, while the piano adds some higher register notes and some final meaty chords. And then track 7 is called Lament. This has a bass gliss slide up into a halting, alternating rhythm of bass and piano chords. Yuval then gets some bluesy soloing time on bass. Drabkin joins in on tenor for the bluesy melody. There's a nice chord progression in the final section that breaks up the sort of just simple bluesy alternation. The chords modulate, and then Drabkin gets a solo that he starts kind of reserved with, but gets a lot of sexy bluesy licks in there. Berkovitz solos next, and he plays a nice mix of bluesy ideas, some lightly touched phrases, and then some more powerful chords. It's a nice contrast. Drabkin joins back in for a go-around on the melody again. He gets some more blowing in, and the repeated chords continue for a bit while they wrap it up. So that's it, 7 tracks. I enjoyed this recording a lot. Berkovitz pulls off a lot here for a debut recording. The tunes are interesting and attractive. He mostly fits into, the modern jazz sound that's out there now, but he includes enough of these sort of Middle Eastern and other kind of musical modal influences, and then the Spanish Cuban kind of ideas to give just that extra bit of international flavor and uniqueness to the music. Borikov's trumpet and soloing ideas add a lot to the tunes he plays on. So I thought it's an intriguing mix, nice balance, good original compositions. I'm definitely going to be looking for whatever Berkovitz comes up with next. If this is his start point on recordings, I can only see more interesting things coming out in the future.
Yeah, this was really impressive. The arrangements are really just expanded into
they're really
big
lush.
They're lush, and they all kind of sort of start with this kind of haze where everybody's sort of doing his own thing, like the universe is sort of being created, and then suddenly bang, it's like into the theme. I enjoyed that. Also, towards the end, you didn't mention this, but there were some really tricky time signatures in these. Like I think Eurydice had an odd one. I was hearing. I think that was the one. that was 5, or I
Track
couldn't tell.
5, yeah.
Yeah, and then Ensoff had like 5/4 or 7/8. I couldn't really tell, but there was some sort of dropping off, sort of the sort of feeling that really kind of drew me in. I like that a lot too. There's a lot of detail on this record, and it sounds like it would repay repeated listening. Unfortunately, it looks like, as you were talking, I looked this up, and it looks like we're not going to be getting this on CD because there isn't one. It's only a sound file.
You know,
or is there?
No, we'll let Nadav know about this podcast. But I noticed him on Facebook. He's opening up a big box of these CDs. So.
Oh, really? So they're going to put them out? Because they don't seem to be available now.
Okay. Wow.
Did you get the date of the post?
No. Well, I'll check it out after this podcast.
Yeah, I would like a CD of this.
Nadav, if you check out this podcast, we're interested in getting some of the CDs.
In CDs.
Yeah.
We're very much a hard copy people.
Yeah. You can't take that away from me, as the song says, right?
Yeah. Oh, I also want to mention, the piece Eurydice. You said he's Orpheus's wife. Well, the story goes, she would have been Orpheus's wife if she hadn't died the day of her wedding.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
By being bitten by a serpent. The serpent. And as those of us who have heard every frigging operatic setting of that story, know, it's been made into an opera many times.
Yeah.
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 All right.
Of course, then, and that happens, you don't have to pay alimony in the future. So.
Yeah, but then he went into Hades to get her back, and he actually gets her back, and then he looks at her, and she disappears again, and then he gets torn apart by wild women on a mountainside. So it wasn't. I don't know if it was worth it.
I don't know. Probably not.
Yeah.
Probably not.
He should have just done a podcast like us. He would have been happier.
Yeah. Yeah. There you go.
Or started a concert career. He was apparently a really good player.
All right. We started out in River Boat and Algeria, go across the Mediterranean to Israel. And now we're going to go back with someone who came from Israel but has been in New York for a while because he's one of the top guitarists out there. And actually, this album is not called Riverboat, but Riverside.
Yeah.
And it's on the Outside in Music label. And this is Osnoy.
Yeah.
Cool
One
name.
wonders if it's the Hudson or the East.
Yeah. So Osnoy, guitarist extraordinaire. And here we've got an interesting trio. This album has an interesting story. We've got Ray Marchka on drums, who is kind of a Broadway playing musician, working musician, a session player. And we've got the German-Nigerian bassist Ugonna Akegwo, who played with Jackie Terrasson, and I know him very well from his work with Tom Harrell, the great trumpeter. And I have every Tom Harrell recording that's ever been made, and he plays on a number of those. But Noy himself was born in Israel, and he started his musical career at a really young age, playing all kinds of music, jazz, blues, pop, rock, and he was, by his teenage years, he was making it with top pros in Israel, became one of the best studio players there in his early 20s, and then he came to New York in around 1996 and started a big impact on the music scene there. I think my image of his playing on the recordings I've heard is more of a kind of a fusion style, with a harder kind of rock influenced sound. But here, he's working with at least jazz standard material, although what he's going to take out of that is a little bit different. So the title here, Riverside, refers to the genesis for this recording. So like other musicians during the COVID pandemic, gigs were shut down. There was no playing indoors, live venues. And so these other guys, Akego and Machika, all live in his neighborhood. And so they started going down by the Hudson River to jam out in the park together. And these are some of the tunes that they were working on, just playing out in the park. And that became kind of inspiration to record them all together. And as I said, we've got real jazz standards here, but you're going to hear them in a kind of unique way and with a little bit of twist here. So we're going to start out with All the Things You Are. Here, Noy plays around with the melody for an introduction, almost in tempo, with some improvised movements. On the unresolved chord, then the bass and drums come in, and everyone's together. Noy works around the melody again, while you hear some nice string sounds from Akego's bass and tight brushwork from Machika. I really like Machika's drumming on this. It's
all the way
really
through,
tight.
really.
Yeah.
He
on the whole album.
He gets good grooves, really.
Yeah, really good grooves. There's a break before Noy is off on a fluid solo. Other than endless melodic phrases, he's another one of these guys who's never going to run out of ideas. He also works in some technically crazy ideas. I even wrote down times at things I couldn't figure out what is going on. Like, listen, at 2 minutes and 5 seconds, guitar players. What is that? I don't know. That's very cool. He finishes off the last time around, adding chords back into the melody before he passes it off to Akegwo for a rhythmic and woody sounding bass solo. Noy comes back in with some pitch play, some little bending things there. Start trading off eights with Machika, and I like Machika's light and detailed textures. They have a go around the melody again, and the vamp out is cool, with Noy doubling up on the bass and alternating chords, and they stretch out the time, slow it down together, which is not an easy thing to do. But
I said that it unwinds like a clock spring.
Yeah.
That's what it sounds like.
The time gets pulled out. Well, it is cool.
It's really cool, yeah.
Track 2, Anthropology, the Charlie Parker tune. And we get a little drum intro, and then Noy bops through the Charlie Parker melody. Here he swings through this solo, adding 16th note phrases, never losing the groove. Sometimes he adds chords and spots, and his ending is quite unexpected. You have to listen to what he does there.
It's very abrupt.
Tone. Before Machika gets a solo, where you can always feel the heavy groove. When he solos, you're still going to have the groove going on any of this album. And then they have a romp through the head again. Now we're going to get some creative arrangements of things. 3, the old tune, Have You Met Miss Jones? Here it gets a light kind of 6/8 swing feel, unusual treatment. Noy picks out great melodic lines. He's having fun with the time, switching up with kind of even figures, evenly played and not swinging, and then back into swing feel in spots. Akegwo shows off his melodic ideas in another good bass solo, and then Noy trades off with Machika before they go around the tune and end up on a repeated and slowing riff. 4 is another kind of transformed tune, Billy's Bounce. It's not usually a ballad, but here it is, and it gets kind of a country swing feel to it. Never heard it like this before. Noy has some fun surprises with the harmony and plays a lot of shimmering chords. It gets into a slow bluesy groove with Noy pulling out bluesy licks and trills, and then some contrasting cool jazzy phrases. He gets some lazy timed stretched out chords and a unique cadenza at the end. There's too much going on this one to describe it all, but it's very tasty reinterpretation of this tune. Track 5 is called Riverside Blues. I guess this is a tune they just composed while they were jamming by the river. It's a rock shuffle. It's a lot of fun. Akegwo lays down a great thick bass line. Noy shows off lots of bluesy licks, and there's this really cool screaming chord right at one of his earlier go-arounds. He works into some blazing double-time bluesy phrases and rhythmic interval passages, and it's all child play to him. Is just any tempo, anything. He never loses the groove in his playing. Antiqua has a steady bass solo as well before they give the melody one more shot. The next tune is called 6/8 Lunch Break.
That's a good title.
Yeah, this is just a little short solo feature for Machika on drums. And here again, he shows he can keep a groove going while doing inventive things around the drum set. So this one particularly has some tasty tom work on the set while he keeps that nice groove going on. Track 7, this one is kind of interesting. It's the old standard Out of Nowhere. You came along out of nowhere. Noy starts this out with an original riff idea. You'll have no idea what the tune is when you hear this, but I listened to this and it sounds kind of like a Spanish ZZ Top riff. I don't know if that makes any sense to you, but listen to it. You'll see what I mean. It's got that, Spanish 2-chord thing but it has the tonality of this kind of ZZ Top thing before it segues into the melody. Now, if you start counting at the original riff, you'll also realize what's been transformed in this song too. And somehow they play it as if it's always been this way, but it sounds a little bit loose and different because it's swinging, but it's in 5/4 instead of 4/4. So
I thought those. Yeah.
It's really,
I was kind of,
it's really hard to take a melody that's in 1 meter and then change it into another meter, but still have it sound, completely recognizable. It doesn't seem to bother Noy. He's got enough ideas to fill that extra beat and keep the swing feeling going too. But that's kind of creative to stretch something out like that. Antiqua gets a solo here too. And then they hit the melody again at the end. So a nice transformation of time signatures on this one. Track 8, Donna Lee. Big drum beat intro on this one, and Noy gets to show off his blazing chops on this tune. Antiqua drops out on some sections of the melody as Noy flies through his lines. Listen to the tightness of their interplay when they join his rhythmic kind of staggering. Like right at 1 minute and 43 seconds, he's going to vary up the rhythm and the drum and bass are instantly there with him. I don't think this is kind of a rehearsed thing, it comes from playing together and listening. So a real great interplay and tightness in this trio. Machika gets a drum solo before Noy has another rip through the melody here. Let me get track 9. This could be the start of something big. This might be Steve Allen tune. I'm not sure. So I used to play this in big band, back when I was young. This is kind of a standard tune. Medium fast swing treatment of this one that allows for some nice rhythmic play and hesitation with the chords during the familiar melody. Noy keeps a lot of the melody in his solo on this one. It includes a lot of rhythmic variations as well. The rhythmic change up at the end of his solo is particularly very cool. Antiqua has a solo here that's nicely measured out with melodic phrases. They go around the melody again, and Noy trades off with Machika. Listen to the exchange Noy does at about 4:45, 4 minutes 45 seconds, working in this wailing blues riff. You're never going to hear a blues riff like that on this tune again. It's just out of nowhere. And then we finish off with track 10, Sunny. This is that old Bobby Hebb R&B tune, 1966, that just lends itself to a funky groove. And they go around it twice with Noy spicing it up on the second time. And then he launches into some blazing lines to start his solo. He eases off a little bit for some melodic lines in between laying down these really incredible figures in all directions with some machine gun-like repeated notes, crazy outside licks, and rapid strums to finish off. Well, you know what? If I could play guitar as well as this, I'd show off too. So he's just having a lot of fun here. It's a great jamming tune to finish out the set. So This is a fun album of standards that are pushed and pulled in fun and quirky, creative ways. Great interplay between the trio. Noy shows off his jazzier side here, but he doesn't let you forget that he can rock out, and his monster chops can cook up anything he wants to do. Unlimited technical ability, but he always makes sure that it tastes good, whatever he fires up. So really fun album. Any guitar players, chop guys, listen to this guy play.
It doesn't just taste good, but there's a lot on the grill there.
There's a lot.
Again, like you said, there are a lot of ideas. I just love that when musicians can do that. Either in a classical composition or especially in jazz when it's just happening, like, off the cuff, and there's just idea after idea. It's just amazing to me.
Well,
this album is like that.
I have to say, unfortunately, in guitar world, there are a lot of really big names that get thrown around of these guitar players, and a lot of their music, when I listen to it, it's a one and done. It's like, okay, I'm glad you performed your gymnastic exercises, and it's a little bit of well, I don't want to use the word because we have a clean podcast, but let's say it's a self-stimulation exercise on the fretboard
that our new logo might inspire. Actually,
it could be. I hope not. But what I like is when I could hear a great player who has got chops but never wastes them, and everything is really tasty and good.
Fantastic. Listen to this guy, guitarist, and
check this out.
Get some ideas there.
Yeah. So good romp, and a little bit different jazz journey this week, but that's always good to do. I
enjoyed this particular jazz journey a lot. Really, all three of these records. Now I'm thinking I kind of want all three of them, but I don't know. Let's see.
We're early in the year yet. We're just getting started.
Early in the year. Yeah.
Anyway,
exactly.
So this has been episode 51 of Adult Music, the podcast with music for the mature mind. I'm sure that new neon logo is glowing in your retina, so be sure to check that out. And as I said, please do like and subscribe on whatever service or platform you listen to us on. If you'd like to contact us with any comments or feedback, we'd like to hear from you. Just drop us an email at adultmusicpodcast, all one word, at gmail.com, or come over to our new kind of under construction Facebook page. That's also Adult Music Podcast, just one word. You can find us there. If you want to leave a comment, you can also listen to the Podbean episodes there.
And you can see a picture of us too. Yeah. That's me in the green turtleneck on the left, by the way.
It's Mike on the left.
Mike on the left.
I'm on the right with the full glass of whiskey.
We both have whiskey.
Yeah, we both have whiskeys. Yeah. So
that was our first anniversary. That picture was taken at our first anniversary episode.
That's right.
It was an enjoyable occasion, I have to say.
Yep. So thanks again to Fast Signs for our new logo and coming business cards.
We're somebody now.
Yeah.
Thank you to my brother, Richard Vezuto.
Thanks, Richard.
And to Efren Aquino for the design, the fantastic design.
Looking forward to getting those.
Those business cards would be cool. Just kind of hang around. Hey, I do a podcast and nobody cares. I think somebody said that when you start a podcast, like all your other qualifications, like to do work, just kind of disappear because nobody wants you anymore.
Could be. It could be.
This is all we got left.
No. This is good therapy, too, from the rest of the world.
It is good therapy, I guess. Not really. Can't really just... Well, we could whinge and complain about things, but it just kind of makes me happy just listening to all this music all the time.
Listen to good music. What are we going to listen to next week? Well, if you want to find out, tomorrow, go over to Deezer and check out the podcast playlist for episode 52, where you can get all of the content 1 week early and start listening to it. And... as we will from tomorrow. So until next week, have a good week, and we'll see you again for episode 52.